Well, hey everybody, it's Sandy and welcome back to my channel dedicated to helping you advocate for your own health one topic at a time. So as if we weren't all sick and tired enough of COVID, are you guys as sick as I am of all the politics? Yeah, so I could go on and on and on, and I know I've said before that I want to keep politics out of my channel, so I'm not going to really discuss my own politics. And I know we all think of ourselves as centrist, but I really do think I'm kind of in the middle. I mean, on some issues, I tend to lean one way, on other issues, I lean a different way. And it just doesn't seem that I line up along any party lines. I kind of think that if there were going to be a new political party and I got to name it, I would call it No More Kool-Aid. I'm only willing to drink so much Kool-Aid. And I think nothing has really exemplified this like this pandemic. And while, yeah, like I said, I don't want to get into politics in general. There are two specific issues that I want to talk about because I don't know if this is a vent or it's a good way to articulate and maybe other people can see if this is percolating in the back of their heads. But there are two specific issues that I want to talk about. And, I will say the genesis of this was, it's not entirely related, but I recently had a video taken down. Some of you already know, some people had a chance to start watching it. It was a video interview that I did with a doctor who's using the medication that starts with an I for early outpatient treatment of COVID. I'm not saying it's the best treatment. I'm not saying it's the only treatment. I'm not going to get all into it because I don't want this video taken down. I was also told, by the way, that I would only get one warning, and after that I'd be in like YouTube jail. So I think they'll take me down for a week. I don't know, maybe they can take me down forever. So I'm not going to be revisiting that topic. But it did make me think, like, how are people out there when I see what's out there, and to think that somebody like took my content down, like as though my channel's not safe for YouTube. But I could just get myself all upset starting to talk about that, and I don't want to do that. But it just got me thinking about, how there's nothing anymore that isn't political. There are two issues in particular now that I feel so strongly about that I have written about. So this first one has to do with children and face masks. The other one has to do with all these Holocaust comparisons. So let's talk about kids and face masks to start out with, because, first of all, I got into more than one Facebook fight about this. And I actually wrote somebody who's a legislator, not my own legislator, so I'm not one of the constituents, but somebody who's been prolific about this issue, but somebody who I respect and I think has a brain in his head. And I was just hoping that, he would hear what I have to say about this issue with kids and face masks, because I hear all this crazy stuff about, kids shouldn't wear face masks, even though the CDC, the American Academy of Pediatrics, all recommending face masks for K through 12. And yeah, I see news articles that say, well, officials are split on whether kids should use face masks. Okay, the officials are split, but it seems like the medical experts aren't split. So let's just go with the medical experts. Unfortunately, it just became this political thing. And I hear all these indictments like, well, kids get anxiety from face masks. I personally haven't seen anything like that. Now, I don't have young kids myself. My kids are adults now. But, I kind of think that that's something you can always say about children if there's something you don't want for them, or you don't want to have them do, or you don't want them to want. So I can remember when we lived at our previous house, we had a neighbor, and she was kind of friendly with me. We were in and out of each other's house to borrow something here and there, whatever. And she was really afraid of dogs. Now, I've had dogs for the better part of the last 20 years. And what kind of dog did I have at the time? What kind of dog do I have? I'm a poodle aficionado. So if there's ever a dog that does not have the connotation of a big bad junkyard dog that you have to be afraid of, it would be a standard poodle. So she was really afraid of my dog. She always wanted me to put the dog in a crate or put the dog in another room. So at one point, like, she brought her young daughter over at the time, and it was just a toddler, and she was really interested in going to pet the dog. And my standard poodle had the temperament of a lamb, like many of them do, and very, very gentle and docile around children. A perfect dog to actually get a child comfortable with. And I watched this person actually teach her child to be afraid of dogs. Okay, really just taught the kid to be afraid of dogs. It didn't take long at all before the kid would walk in the house and go, ah, the dog was in sight. So, I think we can do the same thing with masks. I think we could do the same thing with chairs. I think we could teach our children to be afraid of anything that we want to. And I think this notion that kids get anxiety because of masks is just a real overly broad, ridiculous generalization. Now, does that mean, are there any kids who don't want to wear masks? Yeah, I'm sure there are. I just think that this notion, kids have anxiety from masks, and kids have all kinds of social developmental problems from masks, I think it sounds more like an excuse. Now, I understand there are kids with various disabilities. There are kids who have to lip read. There are all kinds of issues that we're going to have to overcome. And that's what human ingenuity is designed for. But I don't think that means that we take away a very basic and very benign mitigation tool in the middle of a pandemic. So, I had somebody say to me, well, would you tell your kids, like, put on the mask or you're going to die? That's going to cause all kinds of anxiety. And I said, well, I don't know. Did you tell your kids that about seatbelts and car seats? Put the seatbelt on or you're going to die? No, you never said it that way, but you did expect them to put their seatbelts on. There were times when my kid did not want to be in the car seat and did not like to be buckled in and, whatever it might be, but, we had to do it. So, yeah, I think it's just really unfortunate. I think the other thing that this stems from is that back early on in the pandemic, COVID was viewed as sort of benign in children, right? You just didn't find it in kids. We were all worried about it. And then they said they didn't tend to spread it. And when they got it, it tended to be really mild and all that stuff. Well, you know what? Delta is a whole different beast, people. And Delta has changed all that. And there are younger and younger patients who are in intensive care units. There are pediatric patients in intensive care units. Places where hospitals are full are also seeing children's hospitals fill up and children's intensive care units filled up. So, I think that we have to be willing to accept the topography on the ground, right? Our expectations have to match the real topography on the ground, or we're just going to constantly be making wrong decisions and be very frustrated. And the reality is COVID is right as it is now, which is predominantly a Delta variant. It's not benign in children anymore. And, children under 12 are not eligible for vaccines. So we have a huge segment of the pediatric population that's not vaccinated. And then I hear things like, well, there was this study done or that study done that showed that the mask doesn't completely prevent the spread of disease in schools. I've seen all different kinds of these things. And all I can say is it's just one of these things that's very multifaceted. You've got some kids that are going to be wearing a mask correctly. Some kids are going to be wearing a good mask. Some people are going to be wearing a mask that's not so good. I wish we had a little more standardized advice on things like that, but there's going to be the kid who picks their nose and takes the mask off or sneezes, whatever. It's not going to be perfect. And I wouldn't expect it to be. But it sort of reminds me of like the same thing people indict about cancel culture. And I indict cancel culture, by the way. I'm not trying to get all into these politics, but I think cancel culture is a bad thing. I think this is kind of cancel culture, right? The mask isn't perfect, so we're not going to use it. I think we need all the mitigation measures that we can get. And if you really care about children, you will be out there as speaking for what you think is best for children. I was listening to one of the experts over in Israel, where I think they've got this thing all over us in spades when it comes to managing this pandemic. And one of the things they said, and by the way, all their children K through 12 are wearing masks in schools. Even vaccinated, they're all wearing masks. And I don't think that ever stopped in Israel, by the way, in the schools. But one of the things they said they're working on is better ventilation systems for schools that are tailored toward this pandemic. That's probably going to mean some of those systems that are virucidal. It might mean all different things, but that's something to work on. Let's get our schools outfitted with better ventilation systems that will keep our children safer, and teachers and staff and everybody else in the school building for that matter. I'm just really sad when I hear this politicizing about keeping masks off of children. So if anybody's interested in my opinion, in case it wasn't already exceedingly clear, if you have children and they're going to school, I think they should be wearing masks. And more importantly, I think everybody in the classroom should be wearing masks. The other thing that makes me really sad, and I got into kind of a Facebook fight about this the other day, and that is the comparison of aspects of this pandemic with conditions leading up to the Holocaust in Europe in the 1930s and 40s. Yeah, I don't even have the words to communicate just how much that offends me. So I think this started because I saw one of those Facebook posts that said something like, well, it didn't start with something like this. And like on one side of the screen, it shows like a vaccine passport, or it shows a mask or something. And then on the other side, it shows like, a yellow star, or that famous picture of like the train tracks leading to the Auschwitz death camp. And I got into a dialogue a bit. I don't want to really call it a fight, because I always try to be very respectful, because I think there's no other way to win people over anyway. I batted about 500 because one person in the end of this conversation said, something like, you're right, hadn't considered that. And then somebody else was still answering me with sarcastic monosyllabic things like, wow, or nonsense and stuff like that. But, I did want to explain to people that this wasn't just my opinion, that, of course, my opinion, you can tell already, is that this is wrong. These kinds of comparisons are wrong. And not because not only is it no comparison, but because it trivializes the atrocities of that time period, and it trivializes the suffering that people went through. Not only, 6 million people who died, like Jews who died, but 12 million people who died as victims, and many, many more people who had to pick up their lives and try to start over, having lost everything, lost their families. I mean, it really trivializes that suffering. So I'm just going to read an excerpt from an article that was penned by one of the American Jewish Committee leaders. I think it was chapter in Georgia. It might have been the Atlanta chapter. And he wrote as follows: the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, that's the IHRA, by the way, and if anybody has the rights to a definition of what anti-Semitism is, I think they do. Their definition is also what's been adopted by the United States, like the State Department, by various individual states, and all kinds of organizations. So the IHRA, which created a working definition of anti-Semitism, says that it is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred toward Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed towards Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, toward Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. This widely accepted definition is broad and includes many examples. Holocaust distortion is one of them. Holocaust distortion is an attempt to negate the facts of the Nazi genocide of the Jewish people, a belief that the Holocaust did not happen or was greatly exaggerated, comparing or equating vaccine sticker with a yellow star both fit that bill. There is no comparison. The Holocaust, otherwise known as the Shoah or catastrophe, was the systematic extermination of Jewish people from Europe by Nazi Germany during World War II. 6 million Jews were killed, including 1 million children. I thought it was 2 million children, actually, according to the museum in Washington, D.C., it's 2. It happened because Nazis used language and rhetoric to turn people against Jews, including their neighbors, classmates, and friends. Masks are in no way comparable to what the Nazis did in Germany. How can trivialization of the Holocaust be turned into a movement for positive change? For starters, we can speak up. So there I am, I'm speaking up. Again, I don't want to get all into the politics and stuff, and maybe it's not fair for me to say, well, I'm talking that I resent the politics, but I don't want to get into politics on my channel. But distortion of something as egregious as the extermination of an ethnic group is just not acceptable. And using it as a basis for refusing to mask or vaccinate or anything else is just like walking all over the graves of the people who suffered that fate. What can I do about it personally? Nothing other than talk about it. But I would be interested in people's response to that. I wish we could stop with the hyper politics. I feel like if we could just walk it back with the hyper politics, we could get to some better answers about this pandemic, right? So yeah, in the meantime, I hope I don't get taken down anymore, because I really do this channel as a public service, and I didn't feel like I really deserved to have that video taken down. I did appeal it, but my appeal was rejected. So I don't know, it just got me thinking of a lot of the things that really ought to be called out, in my opinion. So let's hope that our kids can get masked, and let's hope that our infection rates can go down. Let's hope more and more people can be vaccinated, and let's hope that we can all just work together better and make this place and these times a little bit better. So until next time, be well.